all opened. I'm going to talk about one of BondBridge's new products. See, we mentioned them earlier on. So BondBridge has been around for a while, but they're launching this thing called Smart Alpha Bonds, which I wanted to talk about. And I want to look at like the overview of the project, the risks that it holds, and maybe some of the opportunities that an investment DAO could use when considering this kind of asset. So BondBridge really aims to tokenize risk within different protocols, and it aims to sort of reduce risk in different protocols by tokenizing certain cash flows and using this to actually hedge certain elements within risk profiles. So the way they do this is through like liquidity tranches, and we'll get into what that means in a little bit. The two products that BondBridge has right now is sorry, I'm struggling with my slides here. Yeah, so Smart Yield and Smart Exposure are the two that they've had that's out right now, and Smart Alpha is the new product which is being launched now, which we'll talk about. So they were launched in 2020, October 2020, and the Smart Yield product, which has been running for a while, basically enables you to access multiple different stablecoin yields through different lending markets. And the idea is to be able to offer different risk profiles for different investors, depending on what your tolerance for risk is. And the Smart Exposure, basically, the product offers you the ability to maintain a specific ratio of two underlying ERC20s. And this can be quite interesting for different kinds of risk-adjusted retargeting strategies. So maybe you want to hold like 50-50 DPI and ETH and wanted to rebalance between these two. So we're not really going to talk about these. What we're going to talk about is Smart Alpha. And the reason I'm interested in this and wanted to research it is that it's coming out next week, Monday, and I thought it could be quite a cool product. So basic idea is to build risk mitigation strategies using volatility derivatives. So the way that they do this is they basically create this notion of like risk ramps, and using this, they create two different tranches in like the simple case. So you have like a high risk, high reward tranche, and that will offset a low risk, low reward tranche. So basically you create a product that offers different kinds of risk profiles to different users, depending on what their risk tolerance is. And then around that, you can structure different kinds of payouts. So in this simple case, we're only considering a high risk, high reward, low risk, low reward, but you can also create like n number of different tranches in between that have different kinds of risk characteristics. So a basic example would be like if we created a product that tracks the price of ETH, and this thing starts trading at $1,000 and then moves down to $900. The riskiest tranche would take a much higher loss, and then the low risk tranche would take a lower loss. And the inverse would obviously happen in the other direction, whereas if the price went up, the high risk tranche gains more than the low risk tranche gains. And the cool thing about this is it's all done algorithmically, obviously using smart contracts, and this enables us to actually build quite interesting curves and different like market structures that today isn't really possible. And we'll get into some of the cool things that you can do with that in a little bit. And what's nice is each of these different tranches can be tokenized separately. And I think the composability that we get from building out like layering of tranches and using tranches within other projects hasn't really been explored in any other project yet. So this is just like a very simple example where we can get kind of visualize what the previous slide spoke about. So with the, a small, pretty large market downturn, you can see the senior tranche, which is the low risk tranche, has like a smaller price impact than what the junior high risk tranche would have, obviously. And the inverse is true in the market rallies, like number go up more for the high risk tranche, number go up less for the low risk tranche. And really what the opportunity for this is and why this might be interesting for someone like an investment DAO or like an individual investor is firstly, you can access like higher exposure with less capital by buying the high risk tranches. So this effectively enables you to lever up. But the nice thing is that this is kind of different to leverage in other senses, right? So there's no risk of liquidation, and there isn't like a lot of the complexity that other leveraging mechanisms might have. So we don't need to consider like funding rates. We don't need to consider, like maintaining margin and all this kind of stuff. But obviously there is going to be some complexity in the sense that we don't really know how the pricing of this thing is going to work out. So there might be some second order effects that we see that kind of only going to see once the market evolves. So that would be like the use case of the high risk tranches. The low risk tranches, you could see this as like a profit taking mechanism where you take profit with dampened exposure to lower your actual risk. And we're going to have to see what happens with liquidity mining. They'll likely have liquidity mining when they launch. And then the risks associated with this are mainly going to be around the fact that this is completely novel and hasn't been tested in the wild. So we're going to have to see how that plays out. but I think it's a very interesting mechanism that definitely should be explored. And the complexity and the novelty of this means that there's likely to be mispricing, which is both a bad and a good thing. If there's mispricing, there could be opportunities they can take advantage of. And last 2 points would be that until it grows, liquidity is going to be poor. So actually accessing this in any kind of size is going to be difficult. And they haven't actually publicized their smart contracts. So I wanted to go and read them and see what's going on under the hood, but didn't get to see that. And yeah, there's no information on the auditing yet. So yeah, that's basically the smart alpha product from Bondbridge, and I think it's quite an interesting concept.
Yeah, thank you. I do this instrument. Can I, if I invest into this, do they have like a time? Is it the same as the other products we saw before? You have a timing of 90 days and then it's over. It runs forever.
From my understanding, and I might be wrong, from what I read about it, there's no expiration timestamp. It runs into perpetuity. But that could be wrong. So I'm not exactly sure, but I think that's the case.
Other questions? I look in the chat.
Where does the yield come from?
The yield?
Yeah, where does like Farmbridge invest this stuff?
Well, it's not necessarily yield in any traditional sense, right? It's like levered exposure on the underlying. So you can think of it as like the high risk tranches just get like a multiple on the ETH payout, whereas the lower risk tranches just get like a dampened payout. And I think like the dampened payout could be very interesting for use as collateral in other products, especially if you're creating like stable coins. Where you can kind of get like a dampening effect on like a potentially very high risk asset, which could be interesting. But yeah, there isn't like a traditional notion of yield past this.
Yeah, it could be also a product for like treasury management. You know, we had like in the other DAO, the XDAO we had quite a large treasury and it was not so easy to manage it, or we didn't want to manage it in a way, or the associated risk is, yeah. And I think maybe it's also a product for this kind of people, because then you need the money for running costs in a way, and you don't want to go in too much into the risk. So now the reason the DXDAO then we sold a part of the ETH to get some stable coins because of this, the end. And maybe this is not, could be a product for this too.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, if people want to speculate on your DAO token, you could provide that as liquidity in the low risk tranche, and then people will be buying the high risk against that to speculate with leverage. And I think also there's a simulator that they released, which you can see like the impact of leverage as the price moves. And I think what we'll see on this, based off my preliminary reading, is that you'll be able to access higher levels of leverage than you would in other kinds of tokenized leverage positions. So like, there's like some products that are like tokenized 2x ETH exposure and things like that, but they aren't like tokenized versions that go up more than 2x. So like if you want more than that kind of leverage, then you need to go on to DYDX or like a KYC to count on FTX, something like those. Whereas I think that this kind of product, by very nature of how the tranches are structured, could reach much higher kinds of leverage. So yeah, there definitely will be some interesting dynamics around that, and a lot of stuff that DAOs can do.
But every time you need somebody taking the other side, so it's not pooled. It's not like an Insta market. You don't have the liquidity in a way. They have to build it somehow, because if nobody is on the other side, then it's not working.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean,
this maybe it's
well. Then, right? If your DAO has a lot of tokens that they don't want to take high risk on, but it remains to be seen how well it'll work for products like ETH, right? Like if people don't want to take the low risk tranche. So I mean, a lot of the information here is just based off of reading their docs and like trying to understand the product, because they literally haven't launched yet. But yeah, I just use this as an excuse to research it more than anything.
Yeah, that's cool. It's nice that they make a simulator somehow, because I think now on mainnet, years ago you could just test it out, but now transactions are so expensive sometimes that it's not easy to test the stuff. And if they make some kind of simulation, it's maybe almost the same. They also could do it on a like a cheap chain or something like this. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for joining. I think, yeah, now you have to leave for your weekly coordination call. And yeah, nice having you. So
Thank you,
I
guys.
think,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank
tschüss.
you, guys.
Ciao. Thank you. Interesting project, yeah. So I guess the next, yeah, Cody, you go next. Are you ready?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
Cool.
All right. Let me get this up here. All right. Can you see that okay, or did that not share yet?